can feel a stranger's mood across a room. You cannot feel your own floor. This is the shift pain created in you, and Carl Jung names it more precisely. Pain built an instrument in you. That trembling needle is real, rare, and aimed the wrong way your whole life. By the end of this, you will know what your sensitivity was built to do. Someone's mood shifts and something in you braces before a single word is spoken. You do not decide to do it. The instrument does it for you. Before this is over, you will know what the instrument actually is. Why reading everyone left you unable to find yourself. The price that hides inside the word intuitive. And the one turn that changes what the whole thing is for. You were told this was a gift. It behaved more like an alarm wired into a child. It was tenderness, and it was also a quiet way to keep the ground from ever moving under you again. And the day it turns is the day it finally reads the one ground it has never once recorded. Start with what is true. You do read people. You walk into a gathering, and within seconds you know who is angry under the smiling, who is close to tears, whose kindness has a hook set in it. You catch the crack in a voice before the sentence even finishes. You do not need to dress this in mysticism for it to be true. It is a genuine faculty, developed in you to a degree few ever reach, and Jung gives its machinery a name. He describes 4 ways a mind takes in the world: thinking, feeling, sensation, intuition. In most lives, one of these grows dominant and the rest stay rough and half-formed. In you, the perceiving side grew fine past all proportion. A needle so finely set, it catches a tremor in another person while it is still smaller than a thought, the way a seismograph catches a movement in the ground long before anyone standing on it feels a thing. The room around you runs a coarse instrument. Yours is exact. You register the shiver while it is still small, the first flicker of a mood before it becomes anything a person could name. People call it intuition because they have no better word for a needle that sensitive. But the flattering version leaves out the first hard thing. An instrument this fine is always a made thing. Somewhere a hand calibrated it. A needle does not learn to catch a tremor at 1/100th of its size, unless catching that tremor once mattered enormously. Precision like this is a record before it is anything else. It marks something you once had to survive. You did not choose to become this sensitive. You were tuned. Think about how it actually behaves. The reading happens before you consent to it. You cannot switch it off by deciding to. You walk into a room and the room is already inside you. The mood sorted and weighed before you have taken your coat off. The same drum that records a friend's grief also records a stranger's contempt, and it cannot tell you which of them is yours to carry. So you carry all of it. Because sorting would take a pause the instrument was never built to allow. There is a strangeness in owning a faculty you never asked to be issued. Other people seem to move through a room and simply be inside it. You move through a room and monitor it. You have never known the other way, so you assume this low, constant hum of watching is simply what being a person feels like, and you have mistaken it your whole life for depth of heart. But a needle this fine was tuned by a hand. To learn what your sensitivity is for, you have to go back to the room where it was set and stand on the ground that would not hold still. Picture the house where the needle was calibrated. From the street, it may have looked ordinary. Inside, the floor moved without warning. A door closes a certain way and the whole evening tilts under you. A silence at dinner carries a warning. You cannot yet name it, but you already obey it. You learn to read that silence because being wrong about it costs you something a child cannot afford to lose. You come to know which mood has walked through the front door before anyone speaks. The way an animal feels a quake coming up through the soles of its feet while the ground still looks perfectly calm. You knew the house before you were fully inside it. A hand flat on the door, half a second of stillness, and the whole state of the place came up through your palm. You calibrated your face before you crossed the threshold. The way you would brace a foot before stepping onto ice, you were not sure would hold. Jung is precise about what a child absorbs, and it is stranger than we tend to expect. The strongest force acting on a child, he says, is the life the parents did not live, the part of themselves they left unlived and unspoken and pressed down out of sight. A child breathes that buried life like air. So a child on shifting ground learns to read not only what is said in the house, but the enormous weight of everything that is deliberately not being said. You became fluent in the unspoken, because the unspoken was exactly where the danger lived. The instrument pointed outward, because outward was where the ground moved. A child on steady ground gets to spend attention learning what it likes, what it wants, who it is becoming. A child on ground that shifts spends that same attention on the ground itself. Every unit of perception you had went into the room, into the faces, into the early warning. There was none left over to point at yourself. You became an expert on everyone in the house and a stranger to the one person you could never once leave. Name the mechanism plainly. When their fear rose, you did not watch it from a safe distance and make a private note. You felt it as your own. Their fear arrived in your chest as your fear. Their anger became something you must have caused. Jung has a term for that total merger, that state in which you cannot say where you end and another person begins. He calls it participation mystique, an unconscious identity in which two inner worlds run into each other so completely that it becomes impossible to say what belongs to whom. This is why the reading always costs more than information costs. Information you can set down and walk away from. This went straight through the body. You did not observe the ground shaking under them. You shook with it, as though their quake were happening inside your own chest. You have done it so long. By now it feels like the same thing as love. There is a further loss underneath the house, and it took you decades to feel it. You read everyone, no one read you. The house held one instrument, and it was pointed outward at the house, not at the small person holding it up. You learned the others so thoroughly you could predict them, and you grew up carrying the quiet, unexamined certainty that this was simply your role, to be the one who notices, the one who adjusts, the one who catches the falling thing before it lands. The cost it carried for the child doing the noticing went unweighed. You did not weigh it either. There was no one free to catch you. The reading was rewarded, and what is rewarded grows. Being useful at reading the house bought you a thin conditional safety. Being useful became being wanted. The braid was tied so early, you have never once pulled it apart. There is a particular grief in seeing this clearly. It is the accurate sorrow of realizing that your rarest gift and your oldest wound are one object seen from two sides. The thing people admire in you and the thing that empties you came out of the same fire. Picture the house one last way. Every wall in it is a window into someone else's room. You learn the exact mood behind every door in the place, and nowhere in the whole house hangs a single mirror. You could see into everyone and never once catch your own face. But the instrument outlived the house. The ground has been steady for years now, and the needle has not stopped moving. It goes on reading rooms that stopped being dangerous a long, long time ago. Therefore, the needle keeps writing, and there is a cost the flattering version never names. An instrument that reads everyone. You do not get to choose the input. You move through an ordinary day, and you pick up the clerk's bad morning, a friend's hidden dread, a stranger's contempt in the checkout line. You carry all of it home. Each one arrives as though it were yours to solve. You are tired in a way sleep does not reach, and no one believes you are tired, because from the outside all you did was stand in a room. Think of a woman in her early 60s. For as long as anyone can remember, she has been the one who knows what a room is feeling before a word is spoken. The family calls her intuitive. She catches the tremor under a phone call and rearranges the whole day around it, without being asked and without quite deciding to. One afternoon, her daughter says a single ordinary sentence, and she hears the fault line running under it at once. The fear the daughter has not yet noticed in herself, and she is already moving to meet it. That same evening, her husband asks her what she would like for dinner. There is a long pause. She has no reading. The needle that found her daughter's fracture in half a second cannot locate what she herself wants. That pause holds the entire cost in one image. 50 years of reading other people accurately, and a blank where her own preference should be. Ask her what she feels, and she gives you, gently and exactly, a report on everyone else in the room. She is never alone in a room and never once accompanied in it. That is the particular loneliness of the fine instrument. You are so busy receiving that little ever gets transmitted back to you. You become the family's early warning, the friend who always knows, the one people call the moment their own ground moves. Everyone leans, and the sheer reliability of your reading convinces even you that you have no ground of your own that could move. A person who is always steady for others gets assumed not to need steadying. The assumption is wrong, and you have spent a lifetime confirming it anyway. And there is a subtler cost, one that stings to admit. Some of what you read in other people started its life in you. It only borrowed their faces to be seen. Jung calls this projection, and he is unsparing about how it works. The contents you have not made conscious in yourself refuse to stay quietly in the dark. They go out and clothe themselves in the nearest available face. The dread you were certain you sensed in your friend can be your own unlived dread, met on a convenient screen and mistaken for news about them. Sit with that. It does not make your reading worthless. It means the instrument, pointed only outward, cannot tell a tremor in the room from a tremor in you, because it was never once taught to check its own ground. Now the part meant to release you. None of this was a defect. You were not born broken or wired wrong. A small person met a real danger and found an intelligent solution, and the solution worked. It kept that person alive. The exhaustion you carry is the running cost of an instrument that was never switched off after the danger finally passed. It kept running, year after year. A childhood alarm still live inside an adult house that has no more use for one. That is what wears you down. A solution that worked too well and went right on working long after its job was done. Let the self-blame go where it belongs, which is nowhere. What looks from the outside like a failure to stay calm was a total success at something else. You mastered a task no child should ever have been handed, but knowing why you are tired does not change what the instrument is for. Understanding the cost is a separate thing from redirecting the needle. And the outward story has kept one fact from you all this time. The real reason any of this matters. The instrument has one more move left in it. Pain is the exact thing that made that move possible. This is the move the wound was quietly preparing you for. Everyone who has ever praised your sensitivity assumed the goal was to make the needle finer still, to read the room faster, to become the most perceptive person in every gathering you enter. That is a ceiling. Living your whole life pressed up against it is a good part of why you are tired. The reference points of a rare mind were never out there in other people's faces. The secret shift pain creates is a turning. The same faculty that spent decades scanning outward for the next tremor can rotate slowly, almost impossibly, until it points down at the ground beneath its own feet and reads that instead. The shift is a reversal of aim, and it is the last thing anyone praising your antenna would think to want for you. Jung has a word for the way a thing driven far enough in one direction eventually swings over into its opposite. He calls it Enantiodromia, the running of a thing into its contrary, a principle he takes from Heraclitus. A vigilance pushed to its extreme does not simply go on intensifying forever in a straight line. Pressed hard enough and held long enough, it reaches a limit and turns over into its own reverse. The faculty that spent a lifetime feeling for everyone else's tremor can turn, and for the first time, feel its own. If you know that tiredness, say so in the comments, in your words or in mine. I read every room except my own. This is where the wound stops being only damage. There is a difference between suffering that stays raw and suffering that has found a meaning to grow around. And finding that meaning is not the same as being comforted. Jung, writing about neurosis, describes it as a spiritual form of suffering that cannot be met by ordinary rational method, a pain asking to be understood rather than merely erased. My own read is that the suffering that built your instrument was meaning in a form you could not yet claim. Signal the outward needle kept mistaking for noise. The hour the needle turns inward, the sensitivity that only ever tracked other people's quakes becomes the one instrument fine enough to read your own. And this is why pain of all things is what makes the turn possible. A person who was never hurt carries a coarse needle and a quiet drum, and no reason on earth to turn it anywhere. You were handed the fine instrument. The wound was the calibration. What you do with the direction it points is the only part still left to decide. Jung, looking back across his own life as a physician, says the doctor who has felt his own inner division to the very depths is the one who can truly reach another's, and is spared the inflation that ruins the healer who believes himself already whole. Now the shadow, and it will cost you something to look at. The story you tell about your vigilance is that it is pure generosity, that you read people so closely because you care so much. Set part of that story down. The vigilance was also control. If you always know the room before it turns, the room can never blindside you the way that first house did. Reading everyone was a form of love. It was also a bid to make certain the ground never moved under you again without your permission. Your watchfulness was not only a gift you offered the world, it was also a wall you built so that nothing could ever catch you undefended again. Name it without contempt. This was intelligent. It defended a child who had no other defense anywhere in the world. It is only that it has gone on costing you a self you have never once been introduced to. The needle turned outward has kept you safe and kept you empty in the very same motion. There is a reason you have not made this turn already, and it is not laziness. Turning the needle inward frightens you in a specific way. For your whole life, the drum has been safe precisely because it recorded other people. Their quakes, however violent, were never yours to be destroyed by. Turn the needle inward, and you have to feel your own ground for the first time, and you do not yet know whether it will hold your weight. Reading others was survivable because it kept you one careful step outside your own life. The turn ends that arrangement. It puts you back inside the one house you spent your whole childhood learning to escape by watching everyone else instead. There is a false version of the turn, and you need to know it so you never mistake it for the real one. Its name is anxiety. Anxiety keeps the needle thrashing, jerking at everything at once, jabbing at your own body the way it once jabbed at the room, hunting the next threat and calling the hunt self-awareness. The real turn is far quieter than that. It waits and it listens. It rests at the one blank band on the drum, long enough for something faint and genuinely yours to begin registering. It does not rush to interpret. It does not convert the feeling on the spot into a task. The relief, when it finally comes, arrives quietly. It is the strange stillness of a room going quiet because, for once, you are not managing it. You are simply inside it. The instrument keeps every bit of its edge. You have only stopped aiming all of it away from yourself. And once the needle can find your own ground, a question arrives that the outward instrument was never able to ask. Not what is everyone else feeling. Underneath all of it, all the readings, all the years, what is actually mine? But the turn takes whatever time it takes, and Jung has a name for the long form of it. He calls it individuation, the slow work of becoming the whole person you already are underneath the survival, the self-becoming and self-realization that turns out to be a life's actual task. He describes the self, with a capital letter, as something far larger than the small managing ego, the center and the entire circumference of the psyche at once, the totality that holds both everything you know of yourself and everything you do not. It begins with the withdrawal you have spent your life avoiding. Every tremor you were certain you read in someone else, you now bring home and hold against your own ground. Some of it was truly theirs. Some of it, it turns out, was always yours, waiting on a screen you kept mistaking for another person's face. Jung is clear that this pulling back of projections is the first real step of the inner work, and that it is a moral task as much as a mental one. The slow separation of what you actually are from what you only imagined yourself to be. It is uncomfortable in the extreme. It is also the only way you finally meet the contents you spent a lifetime finding everywhere except in yourself. And the part of you the needle finds first is the part you never developed, because every ounce of your attention went outward. The unlived side, the function you left sitting in the dark while the survival function grew enormous. Jung says that when the dominant function is at last set down, the sides of you that never had room to exist can finally be born into life. That neglected side is the door. It is the way back to everything the reading left behind. Something does not happen here, and it matters more than anything else in this. You do not lose your sensitivity in the turn. The instrument stays rare. What changes is what it serves. It stops being an alarm wired to a frightened child and becomes a faculty in the service of a self that finally has ground to stand on. You can still read a room in a single heartbeat. You have simply stopped living inside it. There is a cost on the far side of the turn. The people around you built something on your outward reading. When you stop meeting every tremor before it lands, some of them feel the quiet where your attention used to sit. Not everyone will thank you for it. The turn asks you to disappoint people who never knew they were leaning on the instrument. That is the tax on becoming a person with a center of your own, and it is worth paying. There is a further change, and it is the quiet culmination of the whole thing. Once you can read your own wound instead of only broadcasting it, you can sit beside another person's pain without disappearing into it. The old reading always pulled you under. You felt someone's grief, it became your grief, and you drowned together and called the drowning empathy. The turned instrument does something steadier. It lets you feel the other person completely and stay standing, because now you can tell their tremor from your own. That is the whole difference between an exhausting instrument and a person with actual depth, and depth turns out to mean feeling with a floor underneath it. The drum is finally recording the one band that stayed blank all this time, and the person it reveals is the one who was there underneath the vigilance the whole way through, waiting the entire time for the needle to come home. Return to the woman at the kitchen counter. Her husband asks again what she would like for dinner. There is still a pause. This time she does not fill it with a report on everyone else at the table. She waits inside it. She lets the needle find her own ground instead of the room's. And then something small and unmistakably hers rises up out of the blank band. She wants the soup. She, the actual person under 50 years of readings, wants it. And for the first time in memory, that is the whole of the reason. She says so out loud. The sentence is completely ordinary and it costs her everything and nothing at once. That is the entire shift, and it is deliberately small. There is no montage, no sudden serenity descending. Just a woman who, for the first time she can remember, answered a simple question from the inside of her own life. You will not notice your own turn as a single dramatic day either. You will notice it in ordinary moments. A question about what you want that does not send you first around the whole room. A feeling you can name as yours before you have checked whether it is convenient for anyone. A silence you can sit inside without instantly filling it with someone else's mood. These moments look small. They are small only in the way a hinge is small, the entire weight of the door turning quietly on them. You can let a room move now because you have ground of your own to feel it move against. Another person's tremor no longer swallows you whole because you can feel, running underneath it, the steadier line that is yours. The wound is still there. It did not vanish, and it was never going to. But it is read now, held and understood rather than only fired out into every face you meet. The instrument that pain built was only ever the beginning of a rare mind. The summit is the day it finally comes home. The one who walks out of this feels every bit as much as she ever did. She has simply stopped mistaking everyone else's shaking for the state of her own life. The reading stayed. It only found a floor to stand on at last. And on the drum, after all this time, the one band that stayed blank for a lifetime has a faint, steady, unmistakable line running down the center of it now, and the line is hers. Think about the tiredness one last time. For years you have read it as a flaw in you, as proof you feel too much. It is something quieter than a flaw. It is the price a fine instrument charges when it stays aimed at every room except the one you actually live in. Now you can tell the difference between reading a room and living inside it. The woman found her soup. It sounds like nothing at all. It was the first sentence in 50 years that came up from her own ground instead of the state of the room. She felt it in her chest. It landed like a floor arriving under a foot that had been reaching for it in the dark. You do not have to force the needle around by hand. You only have to stop feeding it outward alone. The next time a mood shifts, you will feel yourself brace. Let it happen. Then ask the one question the instrument was never once allowed to ask. Not what are they feeling? What am I? Leave one line below for the self that is finally coming home. I am bringing the needle home. The needle can turn, but only you know how long it has been pointed away from your own ground, and only you can choose the hour to bring it back home. Somewhere on that drum, a single band has been blank your whole life, waiting for a reading that never came. It is still waiting now. You proved decades ago that the instrument works. What is left to find out is what it finally gets to read and whose ground it comes home to.
Empaths aren't broken, they're alchemists in progress. The Alchemist's Path gives you drills, Jung-based boundaries, and 3 exclusive chapter videos to turn overwhelm into clarity. By Surreal Mind, 236-page downloadable ebook in stock. Begin now at thesurrealmind.com.